teach, what we call transferable skills, self-reliant, curious learners, and creative problem solvers. So whether we're using that project-based learning lens or a problem-based learning lens or an inquiry lens, it's the same idea. We're trying to create those transferable skills for kids. And so we use an interdisciplinary model primarily for our cores, but we do see that lens go through those pillars go through all our courses. The other piece that we offer that connects to some of the things that Dr. McLeod was talking about is our career development program that we run through something called Weeks Without Walls, which is trickier during COVID, but we're making it work. And it is an attempt to help kids see and be part of and learn from experience and career experts in the field. So that's my story.
I'll go next. My name is Jane Bachart. I am the principal of PTEC, stands for Pembina Trails Early College. I have been a high school teacher for almost 20 years. I worked as a divisional consultant for technology, and through all of this inquiry myself on how to do school differently, because I was teaching the option courses, and sometimes there would be 3 people in my class when it said there were 30 enrolled. So I had to change what I was doing because I needed to make sure that kids came because they were passionate and interested in what we were talking about. And so after visiting High Tech High in California, I worked with our division, Pembina Trails, and built a school really embedded in technology, but wanted to make sure that what we were teaching is what the kids were wanting to learn, especially when it comes to technology. So I have my teacher, Margo Beatty, right next door here, and she will tell a little bit about what she does at PTEC.
Sorry, couldn't get my mic on there. Yes, I'm Margo Beatty, and I am a teacher at PTEC. So what I do with them is I'm called the Workplace Learning Coordinator, which is kind of morphed a little bit in the last year into a more of a project-based learning, because pre-COVID, the first year that we had those students, because it was a brand new school, we had the grade 10 students go into industry and see what they were doing. So they'd spend about a week with them, kind of to get an idea of what jobs looked like in technology. And then, last year that wasn't an option. So we totally turned it around, and with the help of Marie at Tech Manitoba, as well as Joel Templeman, we decided on a project-based style. So that's part of kind of their course requirement. So it's not an overall school initiative necessarily, but they spend a good portion, about like a semester, working on a project with industry mentors. And so it's been great. And we're going to get into it this year and just expand on that. It was nice. Sometimes, things like a pandemic will force you to think of something in a new way. And it made a huge difference, because I think it was a much better experience for the kids last year. And we're really looking forward to this year.
Thank you so much. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself, or? Yeah.
Sure. And I'm at our land-based learning site here, and it's freezing. So part of it, that's why I'm wearing a mask. It's not because of COVID, but my toes are absolutely frozen. So I'm having an experience today, and maybe in the panel we'll talk about what we mean by an experience. But anyway, my name is Matt Henderson. I'm one of the assistant superintendents with Seven Oaks, and maybe some of you will be dipping your toes into the cult of Seven Oaks one day, and we would welcome you with open arms. I'm the founding principal of the Maples Met School, which is one of the 3 big picture learning schools in our division, and and I'm just happy to be here and to kind of share some perspective. The one thing that I will say, just that I've learned about project-based learning, is that the most important thing, from being a teacher, and I'm still a teacher, but principal, and now I don't even know what I do anymore, but is that the student is the project. That child that's in front of you, or that adult in front of you, is the project. And so it's really about honoring that child, and really thinking about what are those experiences that are going to transform both of you. And that's what I get really excited about, and those are the conversations that I dig. And then my colleague Maribeth is here, who does all sorts of work, rad work with kids. So Maribeth, I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, good morning. Magandang umaga, everybody. My name is Maribeth Tabanera, pronounced she, they. I am the Learning Through Internship Coordinator at Seven Oaks Met, Maples Met, and the newest Met School, the Met Center for Arts and Technology, located in the Downtown Exchange District. I've been here as the Internship Coordinator for 5 years now, but I was previously an industrial arts teacher, still am, at Maples Collegiate. So shout out to all my Red River kids. And so, yes, my role is to help connect our students with community members in regards to their interests, the skills that they want to develop, the projects that they want to work on. For me, my passion is connecting people. And so it's really exciting to see kids who want to dive deeply into work, into areas of their interest through their project work. But a critical part of that as well is connecting them with those experts in the field, because the truth is we are not experts in many of those things, right? So we need to get those folks in, and we need to get our kids out so that they can continue to learn that, you know, we are not confined to learning within these four walls, but and that learning is dynamic and integrated. And so, yeah, this is what we do at the Met School every day. So I'm very excited to be part of this panel. Thank you very much.
And last but not least, Marie, our very own.
Hi, I hope you can see me and hear me now. I logged in and logged off and logged back in again. So I'm Marie Hecko, I'm from Tech Manitoba, and I bring the industry engagement piece with the PTech school in Pembina Trails. So I work quite closely with Margo Beatty, who is the coordinator there at PTech, and with Jane, who is the principal. Industry engagement, we are the Tech Association. So I would connect with our membership base to participate in the various levels of internship or industry engagement. So in grade 9s, they have social mentorship, where we have industry come into the classroom and talk about different aspects of tech applications and the kind of careers you could have. And then in grade 10, that's where we get into the project-based learning, where I bring in industry mentors that work with the students in small groups to work on projects that interest them. So it's always really cool to see industry working with kids in the classroom. I love this job. And then grade 11, it's more like workshops about careers in tech. And then grade 12s, we're going to be working with internships this upcoming summer, because they're going to have their first graduating cohort of grade 12. So it's been an interesting process. There is no roadmap from this, because we have all been creating it as we've been going along, and it's been an absolute blast, but not without its challenges for sure.
Everybody, I am so excited. This is an amazing group of very people who really work in the field and are experts in this. So I am going to ask the first question. So what is project-based learning, and why do we care? Why should we care? I don't know who would like to answer that question first. Come on, don't be shy. You know this. What is PBL?
I'll jump in.
Thank you, Charlene.
So I'm going to many models of project-based learning, but I think what we want to talk about is the pillars of project-based learning, which are allowing for student voice and choice, for allowing deep inquiry, looking at metacognition. So we need reflection, revision, connection to community, really authentic problems and questions that students are addressing, and some way to, when we're connecting with community, finding a way to allow students to influence something out there in the world, so that the work they have has meaning. And so I think those would be the pillars of project-based learning. How that looks is different in different contexts, and there's different sort of roadmaps to that. But I think those would be the foundational pieces. And please jump in if I've missed something, because anybody on, yeah. And why should we care? Well, this is my favorite. Right now, I feel if we don't use a lens of learning where we're asking kids to become active learners, self-reliant learners, lifelong learners, we're going to create kids who are compliant. And while that might be nice in your classroom because it's quiet, it actually doesn't create active citizens who are connected to the world. We need kids who are creative, thoughtful problem solvers, who want to invest in their learning, who want to affect the world around them. And this is one way to do it. And so that is sort of my mission here at Nelson Mac. I think that having kids feel that what they're doing matters and that they have an influence in their world and that they can shape their learning is super important. And so, so that would be my why.
Any other one?
I can jump in a little bit.
Definitely.
And I apologize for if I cut anybody off there, but I think project-based learning for me falls under that umbrella of experiential education. And Jay Roberts, who writes lots about experiential education, y'all should check him out. He has a lovely book called Beyond Learning by Doing, makes the distinction between experiential learning and experiential education, right? Everything is an experience, you know, sitting in a cold gym, taking an experience, right? But, you know, making a bowl on the lathe is an experience, but is it transformative? Is there growth? And so he makes the distinction between, you know, when you learn to ride a bike, probably that's experiential learning. When you learn about the ramifications of pandemics, climate change, why we need vaccinations, and you do that in community, that might be experiential education. And so for me, project-based learning kind of falls under that umbrella where we might have, as Charlene talked about, problem-based learning, service learning, you know, land-based learning. I'm at a land-based learning site right now. And so project-based learning is, you can equate it to maybe technique or method, whereas experiential education, I think in order to have solid project-based learning, we have to be grounded in that notion of experience, in the idea of honoring the experience of the child. And I think as Charlene said, there's something really, really important, that child has a lived experience that we can leverage, that we need to, but also to say that the present is really important. We are not preparing them for something later or real life because they are experiencing real life now. And for me, project-based learning is a way for them to examine their role in the universe, which can be a pretty daunting thing. When you think about how insignificant you are when you're at the Grand Canyon, for instance, and you're looking at the millions and billions of years of sediment and fossilization, there's some existential angst there that once the child realizes that, now you can start engaging in critical questions about the human experience. And for me, that's what project-based learning is. It's about really examining what does it mean to be human and what is our role in this short amount of time that we have on this planet that's hurtling through space. And why is that important? Well, it's funny. I was just having a conversation this morning. You know, critical thinking, which I think comes out of when we're asking significant questions, comes from this. Has three elements. One is, are we thinking of something new? Are we thinking in a self-directed way? And is our thinking effective? And if we're wanting, as Charlene said, if we're wanting kids to become solutionaries, that is, develop significant solutions to significant problems, they need to be able to have these skills and to be able to think in deeper ways. So I'll leave it there.
I'll piggyback on sort of what Matt was saying as well too, just to sort of drive the point home as to you know why we should care, and that is that he mentioned something about the idea of thinking about the experience and thinking about student situations right now, and as an educator, sometimes it's tempting to say like, yeah, but you're going to need this further down the road when you become an adult. And we all know how incredibly ineffective that is because for the students, it's all about the experience right now, right? So that's part of the other reason why it's really important is because it's, you know, it's teaching students where they're at currently as opposed to trying to sort of like warn them about the future, and you get a lot more buy-in, and it's a lot more effective that way.
As you are all talking, I'm just thinking, what does a PBL classroom look like? Because I am imagining that it's completely different from a traditional classroom, right? Can anybody answer that question?
I'll start off answering that question because I just came out of the classroom, and I'm going to sort of paraphrase what Maribeth was mentioning as well, is the idea that the classroom is no longer the four walls of the room that you're in, right? Sometimes it's all throughout the building. Sometimes the classroom brings students out to have meetings with partners in the community. Sometimes we're out going and exploring a driving question and coming up with some other ideas. So the classroom doesn't really look orderly, to be honest. It's not a row of desks, and everyone isn't working on the same thing at the same time. There's a lot of collaboration that you'll see, and a lot of students sort of helping each other out on things while they're working. And that doesn't mean that they're all working on the same thing either. But the collaboration is part of the process, and you see that often in a PBL classroom.
Anybody else would like to chip into that? No? Okay, let's move on.
Yeah, like, Margo, if you wouldn't mind chiming in, because I set up the industry part of the project-based learning that was happening with the grade 10s, but you were actually on the other end coordinating it during the pandemic, and how that looked and how the students managed to still have that experience, even though they couldn't be in person and industry couldn't be in person. Would you like to chime in on that?
Yeah, I think P-TECH in itself doesn't look like a regular classroom anyways. So it's going to be different. It's very tech focused. It's in the Smart Park. It's this beautiful classroom, which is not like a lot of our schools. And so it's just a really different feel anyways. Definitely I'd follow with Matt on the collaboration piece. So there was a lot of that. Now how we did that last year was through their computers, and they would connect up with their mentors, have weekly meetings with them. They'd meet with their group, and because they were half at school and half at home, they would be online, but they would be learning how do we work on something together when we're not actually physically together. And that was a piece that they had to work on, and did amazingly, because they're amazing students, and they can muddle through all this stuff much better than I can. So that's kind of what it looked very different probably last year to what it might be this year. So it was very kind of online, but it was definitely collaborative. That was a huge part of it. And learning how to kind of work as a team, and how do we do this when we're in other places, which is great because a lot of industry is working on things. You could be working on something in Winnipeg, and someone else is working on a piece of it in Japan. And that's a lot of what they're working on. So this was a really good opportunity for them to learn, how do I do that? And then kind of go from there and use people's ideas, see other people's ideas, and mentors helping them along the way to kind of guide them with that.
Yeah.
Paula, I think one thing that I would just add onto that is, or just caution maybe, is that sometimes looks can be deceiving, right? And if we see a traditional classroom, there may be powerful thinking happening there. And in project-based learning or any kind of learning, there are times for worksheets. There are times for tests. Like when I was the principal of the Met, people would come into our school and they would say, hey, your school just looks like another school. And I'm like, thanks. That's great. Yeah, we do tests. Kids write essays. They read books. They do all the same things as part of an aggregate of experiences that lead to something larger. And so I think it's important to be really mindful of that, is that it can happen in all sorts of places. And John Dewey, as Glenys was talking about in a book that he wrote called Experience in Education in 1938, he said, wait a second, like all you progressives, hold on, because bad experiential education or bad project-based learning can be really damaging. Just like really bad traditional practice. The moral of the story is bad practice is just bad practice, and it doesn't really, as long as we're sort of holding to some sort of sense of good practice, sometimes the technique doesn't matter. One example, I'll put it in the chat, but there's a beautiful film called Hope Builders that's on the NFB website. And it's a grade 5 classroom, traditional teacher. And the project-based learning that they engage in is pretty powerful, despite the fact that they have kids in rows, kids have duotangs, kids have pencils. There's, so just a caution around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just wanted to say that we bring our PTech, I guess, experience when we're talking about project-based learning. And when we started this project, it actually started in, I think, mid-October and then ended in May. So again, that extended period of time where the students chose what they were going to do while we supported them. And at one point we had 16 kids at home, I think about 14 kids in the classroom, and about 20 industry members, all on a call at the same time. So it did look like a bit like a call center, but amazing things were going on there. So when people would walk by, because we are in the Smart Park Innovation Hub, which is where businesses are located, they'd walk and they'd look in our window and go, what is going on here? Which is like one of my favorite things. But there's also times, like Matt was saying, when they're making sure that they're writing their tests and they're being thoughtful and journaling. So there's all different ways of looking at this, especially because our experience is really tech-based when it comes to this sort of environment. So thanks for bringing that up, Max. I really appreciate that. Everything looks different, and the way that you do it should be ingrained in good teaching, because that's where we start to see things maybe go wrong, because you get excited. You go, oh, I love this idea. I want to do this, but it's work and it's thought and it's research. And so, yeah, good luck with this. I hope you find a lot of support around you for project-based learning. And I hope that listening to us, if you have any questions, please reach out to us.
Yes, Jane. And the first time I went through the PTech school and I just peeped into it, I'm like, what is this? This doesn't look like a regular classroom, right? But yeah, you're right. Depends on what you're teaching and the outcome and everything. So, do you want to mention any theories or concepts or authors around PBL that you feel like they're the most valuable? You mentioned some already, but is there anything else that you would like to, like any other?
I can kind of talk about that a little bit. I think what I found I learned, because I didn't have as much experience in sort of project-based learning, and we were kind of thrown into, we have to do something different, let's do this. And that's when Joel came in, and Joel and Marie and I really talked about how do we do this? And one of the things that really I thought was really powerful that he said, my thought was, okay, they pick a project and they work on it, and it has to be more meaningful than that, of course, right? And so he really pushed them to, what is the problem? What needs to be solved? So what is something that's out there that doesn't work for you? That maybe it's already there, but you don't like the way it works, and you think there's a better solution. Or maybe you've never seen something that kind of attacks this problem. And so he really pushed the students to do that, because they would love to say, I'm going to make a game. Okay, why? What's the reason? What purpose is that going to serve? And so, and I think we're really going to try and put it even more into, solving some really important problems about climate change or something like that. Like, we want to try and kind of push them a little bit more this year to do that. And that was really hard for them. It was really hard to think of what is the problem that needs to be solved. And that was part of the most difficult. And then once they did that, they were able to kind of move along, and with the help of their mentors, decide how they were going to do that. And again, with a tech focus was what they were working on. But I thought that was the really the most meaningful thing to really, and Glennis definitely talked a lot about that, about picking up, why is this important? Or what do we need to consider? What are some of the things we need to consider? And so I thought that was really powerful.
I'd just like to add that I remember, and it was a while ago, being an education student and sitting in those theory classes and wanting to get to the crux of the matter and just plan lessons and be in the classroom. And I had trouble, I think, in my early days, connecting theory to practice. But I do think that it's really important, just as we're going to ask kids, we're going to ask kids to understand why they're doing and what they're doing it. I think it's really important that teachers understand why they're doing it and why they're doing it and what they're trying to accomplish from that. And that's where being grounded in some theory is important. And so, really, if you're probably all taking courses around Piaget and Vygotsky and Dewey, all these, this is a constructivist model of education, and that would be one area you could look at. But really, what I would just caution everyone to be careful about is not looking for a prescribed way to do. Certainly you need some resources to get you started, but you really have to be grounded in what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it, so that you don't get into I'm going to call it a follow the yellow brick road kind of sequence that someone else has developed for you. It is messy. It's messy, just like we're asking the kids to get in the muck of learning and thinking. That's the same thing we need from our teachers. It's you're going to be in what we call the learning pit. You're going to be grappling with understanding. It won't be perfect, and that's okay. And I think if everybody's comfortable with that and comfortable with digging deep into what you're doing and why you're doing it, and understanding the principles and underlying foundations behind that, your pedagogy will be the strongest. And just know that you too will learn from experience, and it won't, it's going to be messy and imperfect along the way, and that's okay. That's the way we learn. Teachers too.
Wonderful. And just talking, sorry, Matt, do you want to say something?
Just what I put Leanne Simpson in there, because Leanne Simpson will kick everyone's ass here around sort of what does it mean to shake Western theories of learning and teaching to its core, and particularly when many of our students are Anishinaabe. She brings a really powerful theory that I still struggle with, and that I come back to all the time. So I've just put that article from, I think it was 2014 in there, but has upended how I think about my own privilege and where I'm coming from when I'm engaging with kids in experiential education. The other thing I would suggest is Paulo Freire, who like for me, and there's a danger with Paulo Freire and pedagogy of the oppressed, where we can take it at face value and debase it and make it very simple. But when he worked with peasant farmers in Brazil to make radio as a means to develop literacy amongst people who had been oppressed by the Brazilian government for decades and decades, and then Portuguese governments before that, and basically imperial forces. Part of that was it was dialogical. So he sat beside a learner and posed problems, and they posed problems back to him. And they basically tried to deconstruct some of those colonial powers to be able to emancipate, not only as Paulo Freire, sort of the oppressor, but also emancipate the oppressed as well together in dialogue. And for me, that's where project-based learning comes in. When I see Maribeth sitting with a child, talking about significant questions, talking about goals, talking about the things that are impacting them, I see that as project-based learning. So Pedagogy of the Oppressed, read it about 45 times.
We will, sorry, we'll put all the links that in the chat. They're going to be in our Padlet, and we'll post the Padlet link again, so you get everything in one place. Sorry, Maribeth.
It's okay. Yeah, I just and thank you, Matt, for sharing that PDF. But I just encourage y'all to theory is great, but we also, who is writing this theory, right? That is another question you have to ask yourself. And for me, like as someone who is a person of color, someone that is like also, I'm a hip hop artist as well, but like looking at those lived experiences, looking to Indigenous elders to know and learn about like what are those other forms of approaching education and seeing children as holistic beings, and being able to understand like what does it look like to learn not only in this logical mind, but through experience, through being in community. These are all things that you have to consider, because we are not just like, not all students are heading towards that sort of theoretical like pathway, right? And so we also have to then take a more holistic approach to our pedagogy when working with children, especially through project-based learning. And project-based learning is the way for many of us how we do our work, right? We know we have, it's in our bodies. We understand what needs to get done to get projects done. So how do we then translate that to young people in a way that is, relatable for them?
Thank you so much, Maribeth. And with all the things that you guys were saying, I was just thinking, what is the problem that we are trying to solve with PBL? Can anybody?
I think
Yeah,
Charlene
no.
touched. I think Charlene touched on it a little bit. She was mentioning the idea of citizens that are eventually citizens that are active, and we want that as our students as well too. One of the phrases I often use in class is I want drivers. I don't want passengers, right? And you want to have people that are not just sitting in their in their chairs, waiting for the teacher to give them information. And I know another phrase that I say all the time is that school is increasingly becoming a place where young people go to watch old people work. This also kind of flips that around a little bit. So the idea there is that we want students to take charge of their learning and feel that the power that they can feel when they realize that they have control over the things that they can learn. It's not just the the old guy with with the gray hair at the front of the classroom wearing flannel that's telling them exactly what to do. They have control over it. So I think that's a huge part of it.
What a great analogy. Yeah, I really liked it. The other question we had is what things you can and cannot do in this type of learning. Is that something that it's set? I know PBL, it has a broad of different things. So tell me a little bit about that.
I think it kind of goes to what we were saying before about there's not one prescribed way. I mean, you really can't say this is, you do this and then you do this and then you do this. It's not going to work like that. And I think you really have to be driven a bit by the students with guidance. But I don't know. I couldn't think of anything that you absolutely can't do really with it. But maybe I'm missing something.
I think the easiest way to say it is that the one thing you can't do is expect that there is a magic bullet that will solve all your problems. The one thing that is going to figure everything out, right? Relating back to what Charlene was saying is that the whole process of it is pretty messy, and the path to coming to the solution is definitely not straight. There's multiple curves, there's backtracking, and that would definitely be the one thing that I would say there about what it's not, and that is that it's not a linear path. There isn't one magic solution when it comes to project-based learning, because in the end, really, it's not the solution that really matters. It's the journey and all of the learning that took place along the way to getting to the solution. Because often when you get to the solution, when you test it and you realize that you could make it better. And then you enter that design loop again, and you start right back at the beginning. So it's all the experience that goes along the way.
Right.
That's something kids struggle with, especially if they've been living a traditional model. They struggle with not being told what to do all the time. They struggle to give themselves agency, right? Because they haven't had it previously sometimes. And so it's learning how to find their voice and how to be empowered and give them agency. Like that takes some practice for the kids as well. And so it's not, especially if they haven't had those experiences in the past, sometimes they're just sitting there and just tell me what to do and I'll do it, which is really unfortunate and sad. And so we're trying to, break that for them so that they feel empowered to change something.
Yeah, both Charlene and Matt, that's 100%. And the other thing I would like to say is, don't stop engaging with parents on this, because parents can say, what is happening here? And why aren't we having, these sorts of things, the traditional way of assessing and teaching. And while those sorts of things do happen somewhere along the way, it's hard for the parents to understand what's going on. So I encourage you to continue to talk to them about it and reinforce all the great things that are coming out of this, including their child or our students' independence in their own learning and what they're getting out of this.
Yeah, we had, when we were working with the students were working on the projects last year, a lot of them didn't get a final product because they didn't have the time to do it, because they were huge. They took on some really big ideas. Some of them halfway through thought, this doesn't really make sense, this doesn't work. And in conjunction, like talking with their mentors, they decided we're gonna go in a different direction, or it inspired a different direction. And the mentors who work in industry said, this happens all the time. And sometimes you scrap things and you just say that doesn't work, or you go completely a different direction. And so we talked a lot about, if you had unlimited time, what would you do? Where would you go? Why did you change your mind on that? And I think you need to take that same idea as a teacher when you are going through this project. If you're kind of taking on a project-based model, that it's not going to be perfect the first time. It's not going to be perfect the second time. I don't think it's ever going to be perfect, but at least you grow from it, right? And you learn in doing the process, and then say, oh, next time maybe we'll kind of try this direction a little bit and see what happens with that. So you have to be okay with not being perfect. And I like the messy idea. It's messy. And so if you're that perfect person that likes the binders all nice, like Dr. McLeod said, it's not going to happen.
Be also exciting to have our young people be leaders and take on that role as being a teacher, or being someone that has that sort of adult-like conversation with expert in the field, right? So that's super exciting, and I think that's in those moments, those are the moments where these kids are gonna increase their confidence and feel like they have a voice and feel like they have agency, right? When we give them that opportunity to ask those questions and to actually honor and hear that and bring it forward to the community, those are the times and spaces that, and also even within the school, project-based learning is really messy and can feel like a lot of work for one facilitator to be trying to manage different projects. But using the talents of the elder, more senior students, I just yesterday had grade 10 and 12s talk to our newest students here about what it was like to even navigate an internship program. And I could tell them all day, and the kids would be like, okay, yeah, that's great. But to see these older students with their lived experience and seeing how mature they are is one of the greatest teachers. So leaning on your students, leaning on your colleagues, leaning on the experts in the field to help carry this workload, because it is a lot of work. And the more we all can do together, the better that the project-based learning flows.
That we did find, even the mentors, they're blown away by what the students come up with, because they're young, they have fresh ideas, they're not the old person at the front of the room, telling. And so the mentors are saying, wow, that's really interesting. And so now they're getting some of their ideas validated, that yes, they can think at this age, and they can create, and they can come up with some amazing ideas. So it's great.
Confidence is maybe one of the greatest gifts that this develops. Kids who are not used to taking leadership roles or even being active participants in their own education, they develop a confidence they didn't know they had. And wow, is that special to watch, right? When they go, oh, I can do this. I'm totally comfortable talking to a random stranger now about whatever. It's really, really powerful to watch, for sure.
And so we have 10 more minutes, and I wanted to ask you some to share with us some success or challenge stories that you have with your PBL classrooms and students. Well, I know Marie. Yeah, no, go ahead, Margo, go ahead.
I can. One of the things that we did at the end is that the students presented to a panel of industry members who they didn't know. So it wasn't the mentors. And if you can imagine yourself when you were in grade 10 doing that, I think, and they were terrified, but they all looked very professional. They presented their project with confidence, and they blew away the panel at what they were able to kind of produce. And it was part of it was the actual presenting it to someone. How do I do that? And so that, in terms of a success, there were a lot of things that I wasn't really necessarily expecting to see out of the process, but I think the students just grew so much throughout that. So I think it was an interesting thing to have them connecting with adults a little bit more and showing what they know and being confident about that, right? And giving them the time and the mentors along the way to kind of help them with that was a really nice piece of it, which is maybe different than what other people do, but for us, that was something that was important.
And I just want to follow on that. I think, you see successes with the kids that are going to be successful no matter what, but I think the huge successes and what we get so excited about and feel so empowered about is seeing that student that doesn't want to talk or hardly said anything in class. They had no choice. They had to participate, and they embraced it eventually. And so seeing those big wins at the end was really, really, for me, and I'm not sure if Margo, you feel the same way too, that was just like the best, was to see those kids that were in their shell and were a little more insular because of this. They were kind of pushed far outside their comfort zone, and they rose to the occasion. It was just fantastic.
In particular, we were a little nervous about how's this going to come up? How is it going to look? And they blew us away. It was unreal. And I think if we didn't give that student that opportunity, I would have had no idea that they had that kind of in them. You know what I mean? So just by giving them that opportunity, they flourished, and it was really amazing.
Something to say about authenticity, and purpose. And when the kids feel that they have an authentic purpose for what they're doing, they rise to the challenge, right? Because it matters to them and they feel they have a stake in it. And there's also something to say about that public audience piece, which Margo and Marie talked about. Wow, does that make a difference for quality? But it also builds that confidence in kids. And I think that for me is the same in our very first year, 6 years ago, when our grade 9s at the end of the year had presented publicly to a variety of different people, including politicians, but also just classmates and, other students. But by the end of the year, they must have presented publicly, 20, 30, 40 times. They all just blew us out of the water in grade 9 on their, what we call our exhibition of learning at the end of the year, on who they were and what kind of learners they were. And by grade 12, it's unbelievable. And that has not been my experience previously. Kids would choose to not engage or to back out or to have a reason to not commit, but I can say that without exception, kids when they have those opportunities over and over and over again, that confidence building creates just really powerful communicators. And, you know, and they just feel so pumped. Like, that's so great to watch, when, especially when they've overcome anxiety or nervousness, or this is not their, you know, they're not the, you know, top student or whatever their story is, right? It's just really wonderful to watch.
To do, to take all those into other things, like maybe we don't have to spend all this time on career development and you know, how do I do an interview? Well, they're doing that, right? They're talking about themselves in that situation. When the students start meeting their mentors, I get them to send them an email, and that takes a while to tell them, no, how do we write a professional email? And they learned how to do that, and by the end would be very professional and very confident with adults, which is, you know, those skills can carry on to lots of other things.
There was a quote that I read by, and I forget the guy's name now, but he was the founder of Udemy, and I'm gonna, you know, roughly paraphrase for my brain, which isn't really that reliable at this point, but it went something like this. It said that the focus on soft skills, the creativity, communication, citizenship, you know, things we often hear as being the 6 C's. The focus on the soft skills are the things that actually are able to deliver the you know, the hard skills. So I know that the firm, or the term, them being transferable skills, is really the really important part, because those skills that they develop, they can take to whatever domain or medium that they can with them, and students are able to then transfer some of their knowledge from area to area, as opposed to thinking about their knowledge in silos. And, you know, that happens in, you know, math happens in the math room, and you know, English happens, you know, when I'm journaling in that room over there. And they're really able to start transferring some of those skills.
Well, thank you so much. I wanted to ask our audience, do you have any questions for our amazing panelists? Do you guys want to say something that we haven't covered yet? And I have a question here for you.
There was one question I just saw about some examples of projects that students have chosen. I know that I can feel that one because I was working with projects for 6 years that students chose independently, and they went, you know, all the way from students who were really interested in poetry and, you know, writing their own book, students who were building canoes. Another student identified a need at their reserve and tried to come up with a water filtration solution. Other students started businesses or created a lifestyle magazines. Like they really are all over the place. If you're looking for some examples, this is I guess sort of a shameless plug. I mean, I guess I joined the other side here at Red River a little bit, but you can check out the Propel website, and if you click on projects, you can see examples of the wide variety of some of the projects that students have chosen.
Like Propel, you know, a great example of where an individual student chooses a project for their semester. That's how that works. Like that they take and to wherever they want it to go for the whole semester. And it sounds like there's some other project-based learning models like that, you know, in the city. And that's one way in our, you know, grade 9 interdisciplinary model. Often we present a driving question, and it's the same driving question for everyone. You know, the big one that the kids ironically love. I say ironically because my experience in grade 9 social studies in the past was everybody hated the government unit, but our kids absolutely love the question, how should Canada be governed? And they go in all sorts of directions on that. It's a really good time to ask that question actually right now. And they absolutely dig deep into that question. question and look at electoral process and all sorts of things that were very hard to engage them in the sort of traditional, follow the yellow brick road kind of way, right? But in this, so that's a really great driving question. And that would be a sample project where all the kids are answering the same question, but they're answering it in their own way. And so there's different, you can see just from what Matt said, and I'm sure others have other examples, that there are different ways to have project-based learning look, right? And it really depends on, all sorts of logistical pieces.
Well, it's time, so I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation, and I hope all the audience enjoyed it as much as I did. And we are going to wait for Joel, that he's coming to take over now. So thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. And I hope you stay and continue learning a little bit more throughout this morning.